is Jerzy Biernacki. I'm Chief AI Officer at Mequido, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the second edition of Innovation Waves, a series of webinars where we focus on nexus of technology and business. And before we start, just a reminder that this session is recorded, so you'll receive the copy next week. And feel free to drop your questions into the chat throughout the whole discussion, and we'll cover them at the end of the session. Hopefully we'll get a few minutes for a Q&A session. And yeah, thanks for being here and exploring what's next in the music and AI. And now the moment has arrived to shine a spotlight on our esteemed panel of experts. And allow me to introduce Sanya Haq, who brings over a decade of experience in the South Asian music industry with Bolico and over 12 years in research, notably leading projects for AudienceNet music and entertainment-related work for clients such as IPO, IFPI, Sony, UMG, Warner, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, the VPI, and ERA. She advocates for cultural understanding in music and now merges her music experience with research, spotlighting South Asian artists. Sanya is also DEI practitioner and cultural consultant, providing training and advising on engaging diverse audiences and addressing societal inequalities. So welcome, Sanya.
Thank you. So nice to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next, I'm thrilled to welcome Hazel Savage with 15 years of experience in the industry. Hazel is a music tech lifer, guitarist, and former CEO, co-founder at Museo. She started her music tech journey as an early employee at Shazam. She spent time understanding the industry's pain points at Pandora, Universal, and HMV before launching Museo in 2018, and then selling the business to SoundCloud in 2022. Hazel travels globally, speaking at conferences and talking to catalog owners about the value of artificial intelligence integration and digital transformation in the music industry. Hello, Hazel.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. And our third panelist is Jane Dybel, a prominent figure in the music industry, having served as CEO of the Music Publishers Association's £200 million turnover businesses. She's been recognized with awards like the Outstanding Contribution Award at Music Week's Women in Music Awards and Ivor's Academy Gold Badge. With background in legal and business affairs at Warner Chappell Music, she is deeply involved in initiatives promoting access to opportunity, including co-chairing Attitude is Everything and co-founding Prima Donna Festival CIC. She's also active in mentoring tech music startups and runs her own strategic consultancy, Lafferty's Limited. Hello, Jane.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be fun.
Yes, it's going to be real fun. And I'm Jerzy Biernacki, a PhD in computer science and Chief AI Officer at Mequido, where my mission is to aid companies in cracking their toughest problems and growing their businesses with the use of software solutions, especially artificial intelligence. And our AI department started over 6 years ago, and only last year we have developed over 20 different custom AI-based solutions. And I'm here today to ensure that all of you gain the most of the knowledge and experience that our exceptional panelists bring to this discussion. And let's kick off with delving into the current state of AI in the music industry. AI has woven itself into the tapestry of the nearly every industry, and music is no exception. It has opened new avenues in music creation, it influenced production techniques, or even changed how audiences interact with their favorite artists. And today we'll unpack all these changes, understand their implications, and discuss opportunities that they present. So let's start with a question for Hazel. As someone deeply integrated into the nexus of music and technology, could you share what you see as the key AI models and tools that currently are shaping the music industry?
Yeah, I think AI in the music industry, for me, it's really interesting because I started my company in 2018. And back in 2018, nobody cared about AI. nobody was remotely interested. I said I was building an AI company. A couple of people were like, oh, that could be something. A lot of people were like, that will never be something. That's a terrible idea. You shouldn't do this. But most people were just either dismissive or not interested. And I would say that was probably true up until maybe 12 months ago, when suddenly we've had this sort of explosion in the music industry for AI, and now suddenly it is the hot topic that everyone wants to talk about. Usually I sort of break it down a couple of ways. One is that I like to talk about, well, firstly, when I first started my company, we did use the words machine learning and AI interchangeably. They're not technically the same thing, although I think language evolves as we do. I now think essentially we're all referring to the same thing, because AI could literally mean like, a life-size robot designed to mimic a human being. That's it's a sci-fi term, but machine learning is just taking a lot of data and being able to get a machine to replicate a process that mimics intelligence. And I think we're all kind of talking about machine learning, even though we just use the word AI interchangeably. I think that's important for our industry to know that definition. And then secondly, I have always described that there's kind of two buckets, although possibly more. The idea around, there's generative AI, which is the thing that grabs all the headlines. There's the fake Drake. There's the, using other artists' music for training sets, potentially. And then there's generating new works using old works. But then there's also all of the assistive AI technologies. So the company I built was sort of firmly in the assistive space. And I used to be sort of very anti-generative AI. I think, definitely 5 years ago, there just wasn't the demand. There was some early generative AI companies, but there just wasn't the demand. And I still even look this day and I go, okay, well, if SoundCloud has 100,000 tracks being uploaded every day, do we feel there is a true shortage of creativity in the world of music? But of course, I think that's just kind of one of the questions. So are we talking about assistive tools, which is like Museo, the company I built, which will just tell you, the mood, the genre, the BPM, the key. And I think in that bucket, you've also got things like Shazam, track identification. You've also got source separation, so the ability to separate all the instruments out in a piece of music, and then you've got the generative AI. So I think we're kind of, as an industry, we're broken down into those two large buckets right now.
Thank you very much. That's a great introduction. But moving on, and maybe adding to that, I have a question for Jane. From your perspective, how is AI influencing music creation, and production, and consumption?
Well, anyone will be able to write a really good song. You in the kind of, I totally agree with Hazel. AI via machine learning has been around for decades, so it's quite strange that we're all talking about it as if it's new. It reminds me a bit of being at the turn of the millennium, when you talk to people of a certain age in the music industry around then, the beginning of Napster, and that people would go, what is this internet and how do we stop it? And you'd point out that actually the internet has already been around, so you can't stop it. So I always thought of it with GarageBand. You kind of had to have a little bit of talent to write a good song on GarageBand, but you won't have to have any talent now. You can just create something in seconds via multiple different technologies or multiple different companies that are pitching you their bespoke, in inverted commas, technology. And so anyone who's got a good song will be able to improve it. There's lots of improvement tools. You can, Darcy is a good example of that. You take a song and you give it some oomph. Anyone, as Hazel has said, will be able to strip out stems and reuse them. Anyone will be able to find, edit and use songs in adverts. I think it was one of Tom's questions. We can come back to that in a bit. Anyone will be able to create engaging marketing tools. So there is definitely an equality of skill set that will come from AI. Everybody will be able to do and create. On the kind of back end, any repetitive tasks will be outsourced. So if you're at the moment employed in a repetitive task in the music industry, it's good to think of transferable skills. But that has been happening. And when I first started, we used to register songs by hand on cards with carbon copy. And that's not that long ago. I mean, I'm not talking about the 1800s, you know, I'm talking about the 1980s. So, you know, Taylor Swift, probably most of her media posts are outsourced at the moment. She's probably got a couple of PAs doing it for her, but she'll have a bot. She won't need PAs. Those can go. And I think it's interesting. FKA Twigs, always a bit ahead of the game, has already translated herself into just about every language and has really invested time in training her bots so that she will be able to talk to people. People will be able to come back from the dead, musically speaking. You know, I quite foresee going, I mean, there's hologram concerts and there's, but that will all improve. We'll be able to go and see Elvis, which I'm personally looking forward to. So I've always kind of, if I've talked to young writers or musicians, I've always kind of emphasized the need to have ambition, not just talent. Talent just has never been enough. So in some ways, it creates a level playing field where everybody can create. In others, you still have to have that element of ambition if you want to be truly successful. But there's going to be audience development tools. Those are going to, you know, there's already audience development tools. Even that bit, even that access point, you know, a lot of the access barriers were removed when people could directly distribute their songs that they'd written via streaming services. But talent, you know, can it be recreated? Can it not? That will be interesting to see, and ambition particularly. I think as far as consumption is concerned, for B2C consumption, that's largely down to the consumer. I think the consumer always wants access to everything everywhere at no cost. So that's not going to change. The audience will still want to have access to everything. But I think the great unknown there is really what effect AI in general is going to have on people's lives. So if people are going to have twice as much leisure time as they're used to having because the jobs have been outsourced, and then is that going to be a good thing? Is that going to give them more time to consume music and a greater desire to consume music and to be musicians themselves? Or is that going to create an era of isolation, mistrust? You know, are you seeing, I mean, if you've seen the pictures from the Met Gala and, you know, all of the fake images and footage that's come from the Met Gala. So who can you trust? What impact is that going to have on our population? How paranoid are people going to become? How mistrustful? How lonely? So I think that's the big unknown. I think for B2B, for example, production music, which was the question I think that was in the post. I think B2B will vary. I mean, you know, the production music is a part of the business that I know pretty well, and there's always been kind of leap forwards. There's always been the point where you've got library music as opposed to commissioning people. Then you've got AI library music. Then you've got library music that operates outside of the collection society system. So there's always been these developments. There's royalty-free music now. So that's an added element. But I think the people whose names you see on what the TV world calls shiny floor shows, those will still have names on them. You know, the people that I know that write music for The Wheel or for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or those big shows, I think those will still be individuals writing that, because it's a really skilled job and you have to have the patience of the saint when the producer is going, you need to take 1 second off but leave the oomph, and can you make it sound like lambs leaping through a meadow? You know, that kind of thing is quite a highly skilled job. So yeah, for me the big unknown is B2C and how that's going to pan out, because I think that depends a lot on the population at large.
Indeed. And Building up on that, Sanya, what are your thoughts on how AI will reshape the relationship between artists and their audience, and what opportunities does this present for businesses in the music industry?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, just thank you to Hazel and Jane for that introduction. I could not have given that context, and I'm writing notes upon notes, because when we were doing this, I was like, okay, what elements? Like Hazel said, what element of AI? Like, am I confusing things? Like, so my particular specialism is around inclusive data and how, like, the more data we have now, how it helps us understand consumers and those relationships better, but particularly understand global cultures and make the industry more inclusive. So specifically around understanding audiences and that relationship between artists and audiences. When I was at AudienceNet, we did a lot of early work in terms of fandom and the changing nature of fandom. How can artists understand? Because, it's not necessarily as tangible anymore in terms of buying CDs and stuff like that. People are interacting in a different way, but those core emotions are still the same. They're just displaying them in different ways. But it is very stressful for artists because, a lot of people are making songs, like we're saying, because you want it to go viral on TikTok, and it needs to be a certain type of song. The arc needs to be similar, needs to be shorter. And I think that's all quite stressful, and people don't really know who their audiences are and how to connect with them. But I think now we're getting more data. So as an artist, whether you're getting, let's say, your Spotify data, where you can see different audience segments, or you can see actually this artist, people are also listening to a similar type of music. I work a lot with underrepresented artists, so in the South Asian space, that don't really have role models that they can be like, oh, I'm going to be like that artist, because there aren't that many examples of people who have perhaps had sustainable careers that cross over. But I recently came back from the Survive conference in Norway, and there were a lot of interesting companies now pulling together different data from fans and helping artists understand, okay, here are different artists that you can perhaps model yourself on. And I think for artists that I work with or kind of know, that would be super interesting, because they might not be people from the same genre, but they might be similar in other ways. So I'm pleased to see that, and people trying to sort of join up fandom and support artists now, because I do think it's it's a very difficult space. There are lots of opportunities, but I do think it's quite overwhelming as well.
Thank you very much. And going back to Hazel, and maybe diving a little bit deeper into the use cases and examples. Can you share some examples of successful AI-driven innovations in music production distribution that you know of?
Yeah, absolutely, and this is a really fun one as well, because this comes with a little addendum to the story as of last Friday, which is so I got to see a pitch competition last week, and one of the companies pitching was using AI, and the company was called Set Mixer. And essentially what they're doing is they're taking the live output from a show and then AI mixing it so that you have a production ready asset at the end of each concert, which can then be shared, etc., etc. I will caveat this with, I have not tried it and I have not heard any of it yet. So, and I sent it to a really good friend of mine who owns the Broodnell venue in Leeds. And I was like, have you heard of this kind of technology? If this, this would be such an amazing thing. And he just hit me back and said, yeah, but does it work? And I was like, I don't know if it works yet. And he pointed out that if it did, I would know about it. And I told him that categorically that was incorrect, because for about the last 10 years, I've been saying AI source separation is not possible. I've been saying I've tried every source separation on the market, a tool where you drop in an MP3 and it pulls out the vocal, the guitar, the drums, etc. And I was always super skeptical. Like, I've tried them all. Either the output at the end is such poor quality that it's not usable, or they say they've separated out the vocal, but you can still kind of hear the guitar on it and stuff like that. So I was just very, very skeptical, until a good friend of mine at Downtown Music Publishing was like, oh, you got to try this new one. And I was like, no, not interested. Doesn't work. Not for me. And he was like, seriously, you have to try it. And I was like, so skeptical. And then I tried Audio Shake, and I was like, holy bobbins, they've solved it. Like, I just, they had like a leap forward in the technology using AI to solve something that I'd seen multiple bad versions of in the previous 10 years. So I think I'm always excited, and when I'm investing, I'm always looking for what's that next sort of evolutionary jump where something has been kind of bumbling along. And I feel like this might be true for generative as well. It's been, I've heard so many generative AI pitches over the years and thought, that sounds really interesting. And then I've heard the output and I've gone, that sounds like someone who can't really play. And so that was kind of my joke for years, which was like, AI music's hard to identify because is it just someone who isn't very good, or is it an AI? And I don't think that's true anymore. I think it's the technology's moved along. So I'm always fascinated. I'm keen to keep an eye on tools like Set Mixer. I'm going to try it. I want to know if it works. I want it to work. That would be so cool if it does. And the same with Audio Shake. And that was one of the first investments I made because they solved an issue with technology that people had been claiming had been solved but hadn't for years and years. So I think that source separation is a fascinating tool. I'm also a big supporter of AI mastering. And again, back to a little bit what Jane said before, I think there will always be a place for professional mastering engineers. There will always be, I don't think Beyonce is going to be dropping a new album in LANDA anytime soon. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe she will. Maybe she does. I know I've used LANDA for mastering my own works. But I think when you are looking at that huge volume of tracks getting released every day, 100,000 tracks, and we could be looking at 10x that with more AI generative music. Not everyone is going to want to pay a couple of grand for the expert to do their mastering. So I do think that sometimes a lot of these tools like Master Channel is a new AI mastering tool. It's a great one that can be used. It's relatively affordable. It's accessible to anyone. It can do high volume. Same with Audio Shape, taking the vocals off a track. And where they've actually found success, and I think this is really interesting, is not their biggest success isn't necessarily in the music industry. I invested because I was like, oh, this is cool. They can separate out songs. But where they found a huge market is with film dubbing. So taking entire film audio and removing the spoken elements and redubbing it in a different language. That is a huge opportunity. You suddenly are able to open up, think of the history of filmmaking, open up to new audiences, open up, there may be some films 10 years old where those original audio stems don't exist. You can go for a re-release in China because you can redub your whole soundtrack in Mandarin. So I'm really excited about these kind of tools because I see the utility and I see the brilliance of the technology. And I sort of keep an eye on the generative stuff as well because someone somewhere will have a breakthrough.
Yeah, definitely. And then comes like the Now and Then, like the last Beatles song that was released last year.
Yeah.
And it was also...
I listen to that. I listen to all this stuff whenever it comes out. I just, part of me is very curious, but part of me is like, I don't want to be the only person who hasn't heard the new Beatles song. But I think I listened to it once and then I was like, okay. But I had a meeting with someone last week who said they thought it was brilliant. It's one of their favorite songs. So again, I think the finding of an audience will always be important on top of the technology.
Exactly. And Jane, following that, what do you think are the challenges and opportunities also you see for artists and labels adopting AI?
Okay, so as somebody who's worked all my career in music publishing, I'm going to put artist labels and publishers into that question because I think the biggest challenge at the moment is the danger of having a copyright regime that doesn't support copyright because, I mean, the costs associated with the abuse of AI are going to be monumental, and the unlicensed training of AI on copyright works is kind of the focus of the industry at the moment in terms of and that's the focus of a lot of the legislation that's planned, but that hasn't been implemented even if it's been kind of roughly agreed in various places. So I think one of the key challenges in that is going to be identifying AI works, because it's kind of too late. Even if you start today, which you won't, because there has to be agreement and there has to be consensus and there has to be industry standards and there has to be kite marks and there has to be all sorts. Even if you started today, it would probably be impossible. In the same way that blockchain has never really been a solution for copyright in the industry. It was always presented as a solution. Things like that only work if you're going forwards. If today was day one of music and you're just starting right at the beginning, it's too late. So I mean, when was AI first used in a track that was released? I mean, decades ago. So I think that will be a real challenge, because how long is a piece of string? How are you going to identify it? Do you rely on strong copyright laws? Do you need to rely on passing off in somebody deciding that somebody's trying to pass off a work or something else? That's going to be really difficult. Counterfeiting is going to be really difficult. I was listening to somebody who talk on the radio, and you're going to do this kind of panel, your ears are all kind of out there waiting for kind of bon mots to rain from the heavens. And I was listening to somebody on radio the other day pointing out that around counterfeit money, there's international rules around money laundering. So you're pretty sure that you're going to be quite unlucky to go to a petrol station if you're paying by cash, that you're going to get something back in that's counterfeit. I'd stay away from some of the petrol stations in some parts of London that I'm sure I've picked up a dodgy fiver from. But I think identifying, generally passing off, counterfeiting, all of those things, what's fake, what's real, is going to be really difficult to get to the bottom of, and in some ways is too late. Then let's say you could start from day one and you could identify. So how do you then separate out the stuff that's created by AI versus the stuff that was written by Coldplay? Who's going to pay for that database? Let's say you create a separate database of AI works. Who's paying for that? The AI creators are not going to be paying for that, but there's one pot of money. Spotify has a finite number of subscribers. That creates a pot of money. That money is distributed across the industry. So it will really dilute royalty payouts, I think, and that's going to be a huge concern and challenge. Just how you process that many lines of data against that many copyrights. When I first joined the PRS board, I think in about 1998, PRS had 40,000 members. It now has, I think, 160,000. So if it's going up in those kind of multiples, what happens when your fridge can write a song? If my fridge and my washing machine, I had to turn off my dishwasher. It was sending me so many messages. Imagine what happens when everybody's creating all of this music.
Jane, I don't know if you've got a Samsung washing machine, but when that finishes a cycle, absolute banger.
I was on holiday in the Caribbean. Poor me. My husband had put the washing machine. I got a message at 3:00 in the morning saying your dishwasher's finished.
Oh, thank God you knew.
Exactly. Could have been a disaster. I was then able to text him and say you need to unload the dishwasher. So talent discovery, I think, will change. I mean, that's already gone from a very hands-on process of basically standing at the back of a gig listening to bands. I remember the first kind of data-based signings that happened, and that kind of surprise that everyone was now employing data scientists rather than A&R music guys. So for labels, I think that will be interesting. Maybe they'll be tempted to have virtual pop stars, because to be a successful pop star, you have to be a narcissist. There is no other way of being successful. You know, it's a basic requirement. So maybe labels will say, oh, if we deal with a machine, we don't have to deal with all of that latest tantrum and the fact they've got nervous exhaustion and need to take going to miss a couple of shows. It's that might be tempting, but I think then the other side to that is, if you're lucky enough to have Taylor Swift on your roster, you'll be able to get her everywhere all at once, all the time. She'll be able to appear at weddings. She'll be able to appear on my family WhatsApp group chat as Taylor Swift. There will be no barriers to where Taylor Swift can be at any one given time. So I think there's a kind of zero-sum element to this. You've got a finite amount of money. Even if you've got the best A&R team, even if you've got all of the tools at your service, even if there's a level playing field that means that anybody can have the chance to be the next Ed Sheeran, then it is a zero-sum game. There's a finite amount of money in the world that consumers are using to contribute towards their enjoyment of music. And although that can increase, it can't cope, I don't think, with the exponential increase in the number of tracks that are being used and listened to. So I think we should expect to see a lot of complaints about reduced royalty payouts.
And to maybe round off this part of the discussion, Sanya, how do you think AI will affect decision-making processes and business strategies within the music industry?
Yeah, so just building on what Jane mentioned about the data science element of things, I think that's definitely becoming increasingly important. Certainly, I mentioned I work a lot in global music, and like Hazel said actually at the start about AI, no one cared in 2018. Similarly, when I started doing global music work, when I initially joined AudienceNet around 2015, nobody cared. And we were adding it to a tracking piece of work that we had then. And I was sort of adding a few questions in going, oh, okay, how many people are listening to music, to global music or music in a different language, or actually who's interested in it? And there was we'd add it to the odd thing and I'd present it in places, but there just wasn't that uptake, which thankfully now we are seeing, because you'll see, for example, in Instagram's top reels, you'll see often global music, whether it's South Asian music or other cultures, is coming up top, or fusion songs, like Calm Down, which has become huge, and you're getting artists so that's becoming an increasingly big opportunity. We saw even Ed Sheeran's Asia leg of his tour, his India content has been massive. And I think organizations are finally starting to be like, okay, well, these artists are always doing well on streaming. T-Series is one of the biggest YouTube channels. So it's starting to change decision-making because we can finally put numbers to it, and numbers can equate to money and growth for the industry. And because we need to reach people across the globe in order to sustain, streaming revenues or whatever else it might be. So yeah, I feel like it really is now starting to make a difference, particularly from a globalization point of view of the music industry.
Thank you. So you've touched on the cultural dynamics. So let's discuss this further and discuss how AI in music, what's AI role in bridging diverse audiences and genres. And Hazel, could you start off maybe by explaining how AI solutions cater to diverse cultural and genre-based nuances in music preferences and consumption?
Yeah, so I mean, this is an area to be careful with, because AI has quite famously, historically, gotten a bunch of stuff wrong. I think one of my favorite, it's not a music story, but someone built an AI that could track a football on a field, and it was totally thrown off by a bald linesman and just continuously tracked the bald head of the linesman instead. So the problem is AI is really smart until it's not. And I think sometimes it's more interesting to talk about the things that the AI can't do. And so, we used to talk about this a lot at Museo, which was, in our technology, if you drop in Justin Bieber's first single, I think it's called Baby, and I think he was 12 when he recorded it, our AI will suggest that this is probably a female singer. And the reason it will do this is because his voice had not broken. And, all we've really done is trained an AI, like, this is the range at which the average female vocal is identified. This is the range at which the average male vocal is identified. And of course, there are singers who will defy that. There are trans individuals who will defy that. And there are Justin Bieber with an unbroken voice who will defy that. So explaining to people that the AI does not have any context of who Justin Bieber is. Probably every single person on this call goes, we absolutely know who Justin Bieber is. He's world famous. Similar to the way when Jane was talking about Taylor Swift, you can't avoid it. She's everywhere. So, but the AI has absolutely no context. And so it's no point really getting angry at it. It just lacks the context of what it hasn't been taught. It's just regurgitating facts back. And, whilst we were training our AI at Museo, we also had another challenge initially when my co-founder, who was our CTO, he said he was really, really confident training an AI what Swedish death metal sounded like. He is Swedish. And if he could then measure the output himself and categorically say, yes, this is Swedish death metal. But as soon as it came to verifying other genres such as techno, Americana, bluegrass, he was like, I'm not qualified to tell you if the AI is correct in these instances. So having that, you never don't want human involvement to verify the outputs quite often, and especially in the early stages. And I think the other thing we had to consider was, something along the lines of, so I'm like a big classic rock fan. So I love like Bon Jovi, AC/DC, Journey, Kiss. This is all my type of music. Now they're all male singers, right? So when we build a data set to say this is what classic rock sounds like, are we choosing all male singers? And have we accidentally taught the AI that actually, unless it sees a male vocal, it's not classic rock? Or do you skew the data set and try and make it 50-50 or 33 instrumental, female, male, break it down however you wish. But you're not truly representing that genre. So these are some of the challenges you have when building an AI. And I think sometimes in startup world, the best you can have is custodians who understand the issues, who care enough to get it right, but also working with business to understand, this needs to work for the client that I've built it for. So is it representative? And I had a really fun meeting at Cobalt once where I'd gone in to demo the technology to them. And I saw the demo that's on our website. It's at tag.museo.com, still there if anyone wants to try the live AI demo. And I said, you can drop any track in here, YouTube link, SoundCloud link, just drop a track in. And they said, oh, can we choose the track? And I was like, sure. And usually that goes one of two ways. Either one, somebody massively softballs it. So they'll give me a Taylor Swift song that everyone knows and it'll come back as pop and female and happy and everything's good. And they go, well done, the AI works. And I go, that was really kind. Or they pitch me some sort of Mongolian throat singing that's been dubbed over some classical violins that, surprise, surprise, has never made it into a data set ever. And the AI isn't really sure what it's looking at. So I was at Cobalt this one time and they gave me a song by Bring Me the Horizon. And I was like, oh, great metal band. I love that. I know this one really well. So I dropped the track in and it came back with the genre electronic. And I was like, oh, that's so embarrassing when if an AI is right 99% of the time, that still means 1% of the time it's wrong. And I was going to have to now explain that to the client. And I said, well, sometimes there'll be an element. And they said, actually, no, this is Bring Me the Horizon's newest single. And it is a dance electronic track. and we gave it to you to see if your AI would just claim it was metal because everyone knows this is a metal band, but obviously you are actually performing it. So they kind of used it to test if the AI was real, which was very sneaky but very clever. So there's a lot of factors to take into consideration here.
Definitely. I'm really interested in Sanya's thoughts on that, because you're really into this all cultural stuff and how the music is industry is influenced, and also I want you to maybe tell us a bit more on how digital platforms can use AI to spread this cultural phenomena, like from K-pop to Afrobeats, all these different genres.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you, Hazel, for all of that initial insight. It's basically, I think the way AI and algorithms can help improve the experience for listeners, because we see a lot of variability across the globe in terms of which platforms people are using, because actually some of them cater to their needs better than others. We often find that YouTube is one that people will use a lot because it gets to know you so well and recommend different songs. Particularly, again, for South Asian music, it is like great. Like literally everyone lives on YouTube, and there it's being used so much. Whereas you've then got platforms like Spotify, Apple Music, which are now, building dedicated podcast playlists, Bollywood Central, whatever it might be, which are great, but then you're sort of within that ecosystem only, and the rest of the experience isn't necessarily as customized to you. So I think if we are going to try and get more penetration for certain platforms globally and then increase uptake of those, I think they need to better understand that experience, which I think they're starting to. But there are also regional platforms, like we see, like is it QQ Music and others that are doing really well because they just better meet the way they listen to music, the way they interact with it. I, a few years ago, tried to create this like mental well-being app, which was based around people's listening taste. And it was like, and it was very specific to my music taste or someone else's music taste, and just trying to overlay that. So mine was very either Beyonce or like Bollywood music. It was pretty much what I would be getting, but just that more personalized experience that I think some platforms are better at offering than others. And it's improving, but I still feel like it's perhaps not where it could be. It could be more expansive.
Definitely. And maybe next question will be more on how AI can support platforms and facilitate stronger connections between artists and fan bases. So maybe Hazel, I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And this is one I feel particularly passionate about. We sold our technology to SoundCloud 2 years ago because we realized we could do so much more with a platform that had 345 million songs. And, so anyone listening to this who thinks they don't know about AI or thinks they've never experienced it. I mean, if you're a Spotify user or a YouTube user, there are AI generated recommendations that are either building that right-hand column on YouTube or your weekly discovery. They use similar technologies to the one my company built. The way we've decided to apply it at SoundCloud is we've just launched a program that we call First Fans, which is so that any artist who uploads their music using our Next Pro service, which is our publishing service, within 24 hours we'll get you 100 listens, and then if that goes well and we start to see a little traction, we'll get you 1,000 listens, and then if that goes well, we'll add you to one of our buzzing playlists. And it's the Musio technology that we're using to listen, aka fingerprint, everything that's uploaded via Next Pro. And then we're also fingerprinting the listening behavior of everyone who uses SoundCloud as a platform. And then we're able to connect those two things up. So using AI technology to try and solve the zero listens issue, which, I think there was Spotify said recently, like 45 million tracks have 0 plays on their platform out of 90 million. So it's something along those lines. So, and of course, not everything is going to take off. Not everything is going to find its audience. But for things that get uploaded that have the potential to find an audience, and we have the audience, we have the two parts, we're just using AI to put those two things together to create, hopefully, sort of accelerated but organic audiences for new music. So that's probably my favorite use case in the last 12 months.
Thank you. Jane, maybe a question from slightly different kind. So do you believe AI will improve the gender representation in the music industry, or will it potentially reinforce the historical biases? We already touched on this topic, but I wonder what you think about the future.
I wish I was a bit more optimistic than I am, to be honest. This is really one of the things that worries me the most about AI. It really does. The first time I saw a pre-launch version of Alexa, I asked the guys at Amazon if it was possible to choose a male voice, and they said, no, it's female. We decided it's female. And I said, at the time, I've got a teenage son, and I really don't want him to come home from school and be asking a female voice to questions that puts the female into a support role. Alexa, give me this, Alexa, give me that, Alexa, tell me this, Alexa. I mean, one of the things we haven't talked about, just as a little parenthesis, is, AI depends a lot on good broadband. And if you live in Suffolk like I do, that's a thing of science fiction. We can only dream of having sufficient broadband that you can actually watch TV without it all being fuzzy, or Google something without there being a little circle of doom. But that's an aside. I just didn't think that was a good model for a relationship with a woman. And when we did our first Prima Donna Festival, which is all about giving voices to women, people of color, people from disadvantaged economic backgrounds, people with gender fluidity or sexual identity. So we did a panel called Alexa While You're Down There, because I felt so strongly that it was bad. And that son then went to university, did a degree in data science, got a job doing programming, and he worked with a big team of programmers, none of whom were women. If there was a woman in the office, he'd send me a message going, "Oh my God, there was a girl." All of his co-workers, when they finished work, went home and played computer games. And so my vision, which is probably unfair, except the data shows that 80 to 90% of programmers are men. And I've got nothing against men, but I just think if we want a really truly vibrant AI world, we need to make sure that AI is trained by people with very, very varied lived experiences. And I don't think that's happening now. So I would say that I don't think there's a hope in hell that AI will improve gender representation in the music industry, but I would love to be proved wrong.
I think Mikwido might be an exception to that, because we're a technical company. We have kind of a large percentage of women in our company. I guess it's like around 40%, so quite
Good.
above the average for tech company, of course. Okay, Sanya, maybe you also have some perspective on that.
I do, and it's definitely actually, I think, a few strands to this. So completely agree with Jane's point about who's building these things. So I do a lot of work with the British Standards Institute on understanding how to set rules, regulations for product, services, systems, etc. And when we're finding certain things that touch every corner of society, social media, etc., that are built in perhaps like a very small area, well, relatively small area in, let's say, Silicon Valley, by people who are relatively homogenous in terms of their demographics, it will not pick up the nuances of certain things. So we find, just as an example, women are more likely to be injured in car accidents because the seat belts are not made for their body types. They're tested on different things. There's also a lot of inherent bias that comes in, you know, as well. So there's a few things to look at when you're actually building, let's say, whatever it might be, an AI product service. That's one thing that should be inclusive. But the second element that I particularly am passionate about is the data that we can gain from, you know, AI or the numbers that it provides, because that can be used to expose, well, actually all of the top such and such are men, or this. And this is Jay-Z, not AI, but Jay-Z did flag at the Grammys that Beyonce's won the most amount of individual Grammys, but never won Album of the Year. Now that was from analysis of data, right? So if AI can help us generate more data that we can learn from, we can hopefully use that as evidence for change. But yeah, in and of itself, those biases will be embedded potentially into whatever's generated by AI. But some hope if we do it within, well, I'm always quite hopeful, but if we do it intentionally, we can hopefully make change.
Yep. Definitely. I'm quite optimistic about that, and I hope AI can really help if we really make sure that that is doing the right thing. Okay, now let's turn our attention to the future and the trends in AI within the music industry, and focus also on the ethical considerations and data security. Hazel, could you start by discussing how the industry can ensure the ethical use of AI in handling user data and addressing privacy concerns?
Yeah, big question, big topic. I think
Yep.
most companies are already sort of beholden to you know, GDPR laws and other laws that protect data security around around a user's information. That might be their email address, their account name, the credit card they use to sign up. I think, you know, my take also is, when it comes to AI, that and my stance, which I feel like most people in the music industry have that stance, is it was never legal to scrape all of the data off a streaming service and use that to build something. I mean, you know, I know some of the big tech companies feel a little differently, but you know, in my opinion, when we first started building our company in 2018, we did deals with 3 different companies to license almost nearly 1 million tracks. And that's what we used to build the first ever version of our AI model. And it would not have occurred to me to just, you know, go and scrape it off Spotify or SoundCloud. I mean, and people always ask, like, but is it possible? And I'm like, technically it's super easy to scrape data off any of these websites. Legally, you're definitely not supposed to. So I think that's always been true, and it's always been true for those of us trying to build businesses in a legal and ethical way around, if you use something, you probably have to pay for it. And if, you know, there are of course business models where you're not paying, and then potentially you're the product, you know, like Facebook. So that's just how I've always approached it. That, you know, if you're going to use somebody's, you know, creativity, then there needs to be some sort of remuneration. The industry totally has not figured out what that's going to look like yet. We're in the middle of all the court cases and the instances of trying to figure out what that'll look like. And I do not have a definitive answer, but one of the ways that I approached it when I was building my AI company was, we actually partnered with Rolls-Royce. So not the cars, the engines for aeroplanes. Apparently it's 2 different companies, which I did not know. So therefore I did not get a free car, which I was kind of hoping that might be part of the deal, but it turns out they don't have the cars. It's not that Rolls-Royce. So Rolls-Royce, who build all the aeroplane engines, have built an open source AI ethical framework called the Alethea framework, which anyone can download. It's like a PDF, you can grab it. And they asked me, you know, they said, we've trialed this with our company because, you know, and I find non-music examples fascinating. So if there are at any time tens of thousands of their aeroplane engines in the air, and they're all sending data real time back to a centralized hub, an AI that can then basically say, this engine's been in the air for 5,000 hours, this one's been in the air for 8,000 hours, we do maintenance every so and so, it's going to be in this location, we know this person can go and fix it. Like, that level of data is fascinating and allows airports and airplanes to do the kind of crazy stuff that they do, which is still baffling to me. So, they said, we've applied this framework to our own works processes. We've applied this framework to other large corporates who we're working with. We would be fascinated for a startup to try the framework, especially one in the creative industry. So I said, sure, let's do it. So, worst happens, we just don't do anything with it. But, we filled it in, and you have to fill in all the your ethical considerations, your societal considerations, your financial considerations. And it really distilled for me a few of the thoughts I'd been having around AI and things that were important to me, which was, at Museo, we never replaced anyone's job. And that was because we found that, if a client came to us and wanted to tag 100,000 songs with like the key and the BPM, the reality was, if they didn't use our technology, there wasn't a team of people they were going to pay to do it. They would just leave it untagged. They would just have inaccessible data. So we weren't really replacing any sort of human functionality. And then for people who were doing an element of manual tagging, that work is what I would consider kind of drudgery. And I tagged 1,000 songs manually very early on in the build of my company. And it took me 2 weeks, and it was horrible. One of the tracks was just a guy screaming. And I was just like, oh, had to listen to it. I was like, this is no BPM. I would say this is making me tense as a mood, So again, that's tagging music manually is not a very creative or rewarding job. So if AI can remove the drudgery of some of the roles we have, then that's important. And all of these things kind of distilled for me in this framework that Rolls-Royce had put together. And I think, of course, there are other companies that have put frameworks together. I'm interested to see what governments do around both protecting creativity and ensuring that our creative industries can grow and contribute to the economy, but also accelerating sort of growth of tech companies as well. And getting the balance between those two things is not a job I envy. Let's put it that way.
Definitely. Sanya, I'm also interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so upcoming kind of trends and stuff. I think we talked about the Met Gala as well, and the fake imagery, and this is definitely increasing. And I think it's something that we need to get a handle on and better understand. One bit of encouraging insight actually was the latest IFPI Global Music Consumer Study, which found that 8 in 10 people across the globe, well, across lots of markets, feel that human creativity is key to music production. So they definitely want that to be a part of it. And I mentioned again a lot of the work in the South Asian space. Mashups, these DJ created mashups are very common. So you'll have like a Miente and then the latest Bollywood track. It's just always there, this kind of coming together of sounds and artists, which isn't a genuine collaboration, but it's the music coming together, which is exciting. And there are some really great ones. But I feel like an AI generated collab, I don't think people will be as excited about, because they kind of know that's what, DJs are doing anyway. But whereas real collaborations are, doing amazing. Like Diljit Dosanjh collaborated with Sia, that was everywhere. Stormzy's just collaborated with the big South Asian artist AP Dhillon. Some of the songs, I will say, are a bit hit and miss, but the collabs nonetheless, it's exciting. So I think, or Selena Gomez and Rima, and we're seeing these sorts of things that I think people are genuinely excited about. So hopefully, the more fake stuff there is, the more we'll crave those genuine collaborations. But of course, we need to find a way of establishing what is and what isn't real at the minute, which is quite worrying, definitely with the latest things. So I feel like we should keep an eye on how consumers are feeling about that and track that and find a way to get information to them, how they can, figure out what's real and what isn't. But that's definitely an important area for us to track and work with consumers on, I think.
And maybe a last question before we sum up. Jane, you've already touched on the challenges regarding copyrights in the context of AI-generated music. And I wonder if you see any way that this could be handled by the governments and by providing some laws that would help to actually copyright the AI-generated content.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's important to remember that there are two separate copyrights here. There's a copyright in a song and a copyright in a master recording. So I think the situation, the kind of priority is probably different according to whether you're a label or a publisher. And sometimes you're an artist that was also a writer, and sometimes you're a writer that's not an artist. So for publishing issues, I think the focus is very much on training and using data copyrights for training. I think for labels and artists, there's a big focus on identifying personality rights and establishing personality rights. And in America, there already is an image and likeness right, which is probably part of the reason that the so-called Elvis Act has kind of come out of the States. But one of the challenges is that copyright is a national law. So each country of the world has its own copyright regime. So you can't wave a magic wand and just change the law everywhere. Even when we were part of the EU, it wasn't possible because copyright was one of the pieces of legislation that was delegated to member states, generally speaking. And it's one of the reasons why the licensing landscape is complicated, is because it's a 200-year-old business that was always operated nationally and not internationally. So I think that will be the focus, but I think there's also opportunities in those, especially back office, consistent data, better data, more accurate usage tracking, quicker processing, anything that has caused us problems. Like, we haven't really talked about collection societies, but they operate nationally as well because copyright law, as we've said, is national, and they're quite often government-supported monopolies. So it's difficult to get improvements sometimes within collection societies. But when you add the fact that they've each got their own database and they've each got their own processing, it creates a very inefficient and expensive regime to administer copyrights. So I think, for me, I read a great article in Music Business Worldwide, written, funnily enough, by a friend of mine called Sarah Williams, who runs an organization called Impel. And one of the ways that she was looking at it was to separate out content from creativity, and creativity, we should, her suggestion was that we think of two different sets of rights: content rights and creativity rights. And content rights would include all AI created content. Creative rights would be based around rights that have got a greater degree of human interaction. Then you come back to the question, how long is a piece of string? And when is something actually created? How much assistance is assistance that would turn something from being a humanly created piece of work to a machine created? But for me, I always think, kind of following on from what Sonia was talking about, for me, part of the reason that last year my favorite record was Flowers by Miley Cyrus was not only that it was a pop banger, which is my preferred genre, but it's the story. It's the fact that, it's about her empowerment, it's about her statements, it's about the lyrics, it's about the emotion, it's about the video, it's about the chutzpah of really pointing a finger at a bad relationship. So those are really difficult things, I think, to recreate. So it's going to be an interesting ride, that's for sure.
Absolute banger, Jane. Great choice of song.
Yeah, so I think we're approaching the end of the discussion, at least this discussion panel, because we have a Q&A where I see a lot of interesting questions coming up. But let's conclude with some forward thinking and looking at maybe I'll ask each of you to share one potential future trend in AI within the music industry that you find particularly exciting or significant, something that will give us a glimpse into what might shape the future of the music industry. Maybe Hazel, would you like to start?
I was just trying to think of a good example then. I mean, I'm already very supportive of these like AI assistive production tools, but if I'm going to go for something slightly more out there as my sort of prediction, I am very interested and keeping half an eye on AI avatar artists currently right now, which I know I thought part of me thinks it's the exact opposite of what Jane was talking about with the Miley thing. And when you say it to me like, oh, it's not a real human being, it's an AI avatar, and I think, oh. But then I've seen some examples of it in videos, and I've seen some of the virtual worlds they can be placed in, and I've seen some of the Burberry or Ferrari campaigns that these AI avatars have been paid to be in the adverts for. And I've seen the video results and I've thought that looks quite good actually. So I think we'll see a little bit more growth in that area, but I'm still a little skeptical on it myself, but it's one I watch with interest.
Thank you. Sanya, would you like to be next?
Yeah, sure. Actually, similarly, the AI avatar concepts, done a lot of research, again, when I was at AudienceNet, about in the pandemic, the virtual concerts, all of that stuff. And I just find the ABBA one so fascinating. Like, it's right near my friend's house. So every time I go there, I'm like, right, I must leave at a decent hour or else I'm going to get like mobbed by ABBA fans singing Dancing Queen, like on the DLR. And it's just such a funny experience, but it's really beautiful to see. So obviously with my like industry head, I'm like, right, this is a massive moneymaker. Like hats off to them. Like how have they done this? But people are loving it. So again, whether it's Elvis, I just wonder how that's going to continue. But then what role, we're also seeing live concerts are massive, all the tours and everyone. I think that Beyonce's on like a decade-long every year thing. She'll be, I don't know, it's just constant. So I wonder how that fits with the real person as well. I'm just very intrigued by that mindset. So yeah, keen to understand that more.
Thank you. Jane, one thought from you?
Okay, well, I'm going to do an imaginary one and a real one, I think, because the imaginary one, I would really love to see greater efficiencies at collection societies, more collaboration, and maybe if in the collection society world, there's a real increase in rights management entities that kind of can challenge the efficiency of collection societies, but can't really challenge the rights ownership of collection societies. So, there's an opportunity for something to give and for collective rights management to become much more efficient. But I think that's probably wishful thinking. It doesn't happen by evolution, it happens through revolution. Maybe we'll hit a revolution. I think the thing that will be really fun about this is that the whole world will have an opportunity to have their 15 minutes of fame. I think it will be really difficult to have 15 weeks of fame or 15 years of fame, but I think it will be incredibly easy to have 15 minutes of fame. And I think some of the ad campaigns that are coming out at the moment that involve inviting people who like a particular product to contribute to an advert or to a song. You put everybody shares their lyrics, they mash them up, they turn it into an advert. Those kind of things, those kind of interactions, I think will be quite interesting. And it's nice that there will be a level playing field for that, for people to have their 15 minutes of fame.
Excellent. Actually, it's a kind of like optimistic view of the future from all of you. That's great to hear. So yeah, thank you very much. thanks to each of you for your incredible insights. This was a really interesting discussion, and I bet we've all picked some valuable insights from your answers. And we've got a bit of time left, and a little, I think, around 10 questions or even more. So let's dive into these. And here comes the first one. I have a collection here. The first one is from Tom. What will be the impact of AI on background music? Who would like to talk on that?
Jane, I think you touched on it before. Do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So background music at the moment, you either license something that you've heard of, or you license, you commission somebody to write you some background music, or you go to a music library and a music library will have lots of music that is styled as something, and it might be styled. This is all done manually. For decades of this is stuff that sounds poppy or light-hearted or happy or sunset over California, or they use or more worryingly to commercial publishers, they'd say things like sounds like Coldplay or sounds like, which is always problematic from a publisher point of view, because you kind of want them to use Coldplay and pay up. So that's traditionally how we've kind of got background music. More recently, you can auto-generate background music. So I think if I'm doing a video, let's say I'm having a fundraising event in my garden, and let's say I want to put a little video up, it will be really easy for me to put some music on that without having to worry. At the moment, I probably put music on it without clearing it because it's difficult, and I'm hoping nobody's going to notice it or spot it. And if nobody notices it, does it if a tree falls in the forest, is there make a noise kind of approach to music licensing? But it will mean that I don't have that moment before I go to sleep where I think, oh, I wonder if I'm going to get sued by whoever's music I've used on my 10-second video. So now I'll be able to just create it myself. But I mean, is it going to be transformative to my video? Probably not. So I think the high end, for high end products, high end brands, high end films, big TV shows, they will all want to use music that adds to their brand. So I think it has to be pretty spectacular. But it's a business that's been going for decades. It will just probably change how it's delivered.
There are actually 2 follow-up questions on that. So is this the end of corporates paying for commercial music on TikTok? And what is the hottest litigation action currently being taken on this topic? Would you like to continue, Jane, on that?
Yeah, I think the most high profile is Getty. I think there's some litigation. This is a bit of a curveball for me because I haven't done my homework properly. But if I'm trying to think of what's permeated my brain in terms of litigation, there is a big piece of litigation going on with Getty, and that's about as much as I know. You'll have to Google Getty AI. But I think it's probably more to do with photos than it is to do with music. But I think the same principles would apply, which is why it's probably appearing on my news feeds at the moment. And TikTok, I think it would just depend on. I mean, that TikTok is a good example of customers finding music, isn't it? I mean, I remember when Nothing's Gonna Break My Stride by Matthew Wilder came out. I was a teenager then, so when I suddenly started hearing it on TikTok, I'm like, what the, where's that come from? That's random. So, but it will depend on consumers and whether or not they want to use something. I don't think they will particularly care or notice whether they are using something that's AI or not AI. So that then comes back to the business and the industry to be able to come up with identifiers. And I think Hazel probably touched on the fact that there is new tech that's now trying to identify when something's fake or not. But again, that depends on the data that's gone into it in order to be able to identify what's fake or not. So I'm not sure if that entirely answers the question, but that's my 2 pence.
Yeah. Yeah. And regarding the background music, I guess users on TikTok wouldn't care so much. Maybe if this was like regarding some music that would be like more known like to them, like to build certain image in their mind. But I don't know. Interesting topic, definitely. And I also like regarding the what we discover on TikTok. Actually, the last 3 artists I'm listening to right now are found on TikTok. So so it kind of works. Okay, so the next question is actually for Hazel. It's stated in the question. What, in your opinion, is the current pulse rate and appetite in to invest in the music startups globally?
Yeah, great question. My appetite's quite high. I'm actively investing in music tech companies, specifically in the proprietary AI model space. I think it's really interesting. The technology's at a point where it can be commercialized, which is great news. I also think that, I just got the Music Biz Worldwide email this morning that Concord are backing out of the 1.5 bill acquisition of Hypnosis. However, that doesn't mean everyone's backed out. I think if that sale goes through at 1.5, I think we'll actually see a little bit of an influx of people going, oh, this is quite a valuable industry. We could make some money here. But I feel like all music investment goes in cycles. Something like crowd mix happens, everyone gets scared off. If a big Hypnosis sale goes through, everyone will get really excited. It's an industry that I love, so I'll always be investing and working in this industry. But I do think not only does it go in cycles, but I also think that the key for me, I'm trying to think of the nice way to phrase it, is like, it's not good enough to be a good music tech startup. You just have to be a good startup. Whether you're in music or not is irrelevant. And I often see that, we get pitched a lot of music tech startups that, haven't thought about the size of the market, haven't thought about the use case, don't know about the 200 companies that went before them that tried the same thing and it didn't work, don't know the reasons why it won't work. I get pitched a lot of things where I'm like, oh yeah, that's not a legal use case of audio. And so again, if someone pitching in healthcare or fintech pitched something with an illegal use case, they get laughed out the door. So I think, music isn't an easy industry to be in. It's not a sort of an easy class where you can just show up and get an A for contributing. You've got to be good, but you've got to be good on a global stage. And if you are, and you've got a good company, then I think there is investment out there.
Thanks. Another question is from Vanessa, also for you, Hazel. Apart from Gen AI, metadata tagging, optimized sync development, what do you think the future of AI in music looks like?
Yeah, really good question. I think my personal take is that AI is here to stay. Like, there's still a lot of people that don't like it, but as I'm similar to something Jane said earlier, I worked in the industry. I worked in music streaming 10 years ago when it was still acceptable for people to be like, I hate music streaming. I hope it fails. And I think those people would look a little bit ridiculous now. And that if somebody in a label right now told me they didn't like streaming, I'd question everything, really. So I feel like, we may not be on the final iteration or the final version, and we may not have figured out all the business models and all the legalities around it, but as a core technology, I think not just in music but in life, it's here to stay. Someone sent me a pitch company the other day, pitched a company, and it's a voice tech that's basically fully automated AI voice for call centers. And I went onto their website and I talked back and forth with their demo, and it was incredibly good. And it was probably 100 times less frustrating than any actual call center I've ever dealt with. And even got nuances. So like, as I was trying the demo, my husband walked in the room and I said to the AI, I said, oh, my husband Chris has just arrived, and it understood the context that then there were two of us, that they had a different opinion. These models are getting incredibly advanced, and I think we'll only see the growth of that.
Definitely. We're also working on similar models, so we definitely see that the opportunities to build certain cases, especially in the customer service, are really amazing right now. Okay, so let's move on to another question from John. Do you know of any AI initiatives that may simplify the complex licensing processes for newcomers to the market?
Jane, that might be a bit of a you one.
Yeah, I think so. I think I've just kind of mentioned the rise of rights management entities, and I think there are some companies that are doing well at providing licensing solutions in particular contexts. So Click and Clear is an example of a relatively new business that has seen a gap in the market. That gap in the market is very specific. It's I can't remember how Chantal refers to it, but it's basically sports that are carried out to music. So it might be she started off in cheerleading. It covers gymnastics. It covers things like equine ballet, I think. And she's able to license those entities for master and publishing rights together. Now, the reason that she's been able to do that is partly because she's a high energy, tenacious individual, but partly because she's been able to get the rights. And I, as somebody who worked for rights holders for, well, all of my career, that's no mean feat. And I think the reason that the rights holders have entrusted their rights to her to license on is because it is so niche and because it's a part of the market that they themselves find difficult to reach. Now, a lot of rights holders are American owned. To put this in context, it's important to know that in America, there is a statutory amount of money for copyright infringement. That statutory amount of money is in excess of $100,000 per title. So if you're a rights holder, you question, what do I do? Am I going to give all of my rights across all of my catalogue to this person who's doing a cheerleading licensing service? Or shall I just sit and wait until I find out somebody that's doing a copyright infringement and then go after them and get $100,000? It's one of the reasons why there was so much litigation against Spotify at the beginning. And this is one of the nuances that is never explained in all of that Spotify litigation. It's a combination of two factors that meant that writers were suing Spotify in the States. So from a rights holder's perspective, you're making the decision, okay, if I license every cheerleader in the world, how much money is my repertoire going to make versus whether I would just sit here, wait for somebody to mess up and then I'll go after them. The second option, waiting for somebody to mess up and going after them, only works if the person you're going after has got the money to pay up. You know, you can sue somebody for $100,000 if they've only got $10 in their pocket. You're not going to get very far. So that then becomes a commercial decision. The publishers in particular, I think, well, record companies have a very different approach to licensing than publishers for reasons that I'm not going to go into unless we've got another hour or so. But for publishers, you kind of want to license this. Your only business model is licensing. So you're in the market for licensing, but you've also got a catalogue of writers who you have to prior approve uses with. So there's that element too. So if I've got a deal that says my this particular writer needs to have prior approval on this particular license, I have to go to them. And if I've got a catalogue of 20,000 writers, that's a lot of emails to be sending out. So that is also an issue of how you manage your relationships with your writers while at the same time keeping your business going. So there's all sorts of reasons why licensing has been complicated. It starts with the writer and whether or not they've got prior approval in their contract with their publisher. It goes on to what the publisher's principles are and what their philosophy is towards their licensing of their catalogue. It then goes on towards the fact there's different copyright regimes in every country of the world, as we've established, and they might be out of kilter with each other, or that rights might have been transferred. When I got to Warner Chappell, you get the Great American Songbook. So if you're representing the Gershwins catalogue, when they were transferring rights, they might even have a different publisher for sheet music. In Germany, they might have gone with one publisher for sheet music, another publisher for mechanical roles, another one for performance income. It's a difficult thing to unravel. And while publishers get a bad rep for the fact that everything is so difficult, it's not just because they want to be difficult, because generally speaking, publishers want to make as much money as they possibly can.
Like everyone. Another question for you, Jane. I wonder how personal AI will influence consumption of digital service providers.
Well, DSPs are already flooded with what some people would call fake music. There was a lot of outcry in the industry when it became apparent that Spotify were using a lot of royalty-free library music to flood playlists. I don't know enough about it to be able to give you chapter and verse on that, but there was certainly allegations that was happening, and that a lot of royalties, because it's a finite pool of money determined by how many subscribers there are. So there was a great hoo-ha about how much of that money was being signed off as part of a Spotify tactic to decrease the royalty payouts to rights holders. So I don't. It's hard to tell. I think it depends whether it's a push market or a pull market, doesn't it? Is it the DSP pushing music on the consumer, or is it the consumer pulling music from the DSP? And is it a lean forward experience where you're engaging, or is it a lean back? I find those services for me work much better if I'm kind of telling it what to play, because I get really cross when it suggests something, regardless of which DSP it is. If they suggest something that I don't like Spotify always seems to be suggesting Paul Weller to me, and it's just like, what on earth makes you think I like Paul Weller? Or David Bowie. I'm probably the only person in the world that doesn't like David Bowie. I'm a Prince person rather than a David Bowie person. So that, it doesn't follow necessarily that if you might like Mark Bolan that you like David Bowie. There might be also, so I think for me, it's going to depend entirely on the consumer. I'm not sure. It's going to be consumer driven, I think, rather than DSPs will probably just shove as much stuff up as they possibly can.
Yep. I think there are more questions regarding the copyrights, but maybe let's move to some other questions, because we definitely won't have time to cover all of them. So the next question I've picked is from John as well. Is it important who created the song when the audience likes it? If people get paid because they are brilliant and promoting AI services and people listen to it, isn't that the new reality? What do you think about that?
I think we just lost Jane. I don't think it was in response to that question. She probably did the thing I did, which is just accidentally hit the exit button occasionally. But in terms, I sort of agree with John in that, like, with the statement, if people like it, does it matter how it was created? Probably not. And I think for some people, it might matter. Some people might decide to exclusively choose to support human creators and only want to listen to music that's created. Some people will massively connect with, Miley Cyrus's Flowers because of the backstory. I'm a big Cardi B fan, and I kind of love all her Instagram stories, and I love the behind the scenes. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if I like a song, I like a song. I don't really mind where it came from. And I also think it's important to reflect that, I'm your classic millennial, whereas what we're seeing with Gen Z and Gen Alpha is they really don't care, and it's much less important to them whether who was behind a song, whether it was a human, and they are, the buzzword of my generation was authenticity, and that is now becoming less important. It's more about virtual presentation. So yeah, I think unless the law tells us we need to define it for whatever reason, unless the audience specifically push us to have that kind of clarity, human made on this song. But I think, again, when it comes down to it, if you like it, you like it. So in some ways it might not matter.
I was just going to add one thing to that, which is like, I think that's why we're honing in on the super fans, which are approximately 15%, well, at least 15% of the US population, because for them it does matter support. And then so I think whereas for the majority of people, like we're saying, perhaps it matters less, but there are a segment that really do care. So we can maybe get more value out of them by understanding them more.
Yep. Another question, this one from Andrew. In terms of music creation, whilst generative AI will be a great leveler for novices, would you agree that assistive AI should also be considered like any other tool? That is, the results will depend on the user's skill. Will the maestro of the future be the producer who is also a master of the prompt?
So yeah, I have an opinion on this one. I think currently, the misconception is that there's just like one big AI button and you press it and out pops a song like fake Drake. Whereas the reality is, and Jessica Powell from Audio Shape wrote a great article on this, is the fake Drake song was probably a combination of like 5 or 6 AI tools that all require a certain amount of knowledge to use, but also require somebody with a music production experience to then be able to stitch it all together to create something like they did with the fake Drake song. So it's still currently at that stage. It may well get to a point where it's easy as a sort of a one-click creation. But then I think we'll get down to the point where what's the demand for that? Like, what's the commercial use of being able to push one button and get a whole song generated out of it? So I think we'll have to see if we see the demand there. But currently, when you do see a fully AI generated song, there's usually been a lot of stitching together and trickery in the background, because the tech's good, but it's not all the way there in all the cases.
I think we can cover one more question, and this one I find really interesting. How many years are we away from artists being able to create our own AI software solutions where the artists can leverage their art and data and own everything and streamline processes, as opposed to other companies leveraging them?
I would say 0. We're 0 years away. I think it just depends on the artist. I mean, a lot of artists are tech forward, and a lot of artists are really not tech forward. They just want to, they kind of focus on their art and see their creation as their art, not to do anything technical at all. They so I think it depends on the artist. I think we're 0 years away from happening. I think it's happening now. I mean, the only thing worth adding is years ago I worked with Radiohead on In Rainbows, and on that we were trying to take control for the band of all of their assets, and we put master and publishing rights together. We pulled them out of collection societies so that we could have that level of control, and it was brilliant. It worked brilliantly. But part of the reason it worked brilliantly was there's one album, 10 or 11 songs, and if it was the only way we could get those rights out of PRS was was through aggression, really. And I think if I'd been trying to do it with Bananarama, it would have been impossible. It's only, I think, because of the kudos that Radiohead have that the PRS board agreed to it. But PRS had to assign their rights to PRS in order to collect any performance income. And so collection societies require an assignment of rights, rightly or wrongly. We all have our views on that. So rightly or wrongly, collection societies require an assignment of rights. And then that makes it difficult for artists to be in control of their licensing. And I think we're not yet at the tipping point where the money that they would make from being in control of the licensing exceeds the money that they make by being part of a collective. So, for example, PRS takes the role of licensing blanket licenses with BBC, and those kind of deals are really important to artists. Some of them hate them, but it's, you know, there is a distribution that is probably in excess of other sources of income. So it's at some point there'll be a tipping point, and at some point I think artists will go, why am I not doing this myself? It will be easier to license that bar in Krakow than it is at the moment, or in that remote village in Mexico. You know, it's reach. As soon as the reach issue is resolved, I think things will change. But that is really impacting on how artists can control their own assets at the moment.
Thank you. And yeah, unfortunately, it looks like we're out of time for today. So we didn't get to answer all your questions, but don't worry, we're not stopping here. If you want to ask us more questions, just feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. Our speakers would love to keep the conversation going there. And remember to check your inbox next week for the recording. And remember, Innovation Waves and AI Waves will be back soon with more great talks, so don't miss out. Actually, next month we're planning the next AI Waves edition, and we'll be covering the European AI Act, so a hot topic today. So once again, big thanks to everyone who joined us today. We can't wait to see you at the next event. Take care and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.